This is The Truth in a Nutshell. I am Michael Boldea, your host, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this week's installment wherein we conclude our 8-part series entitled The Vigilant Warrior. I realize it doesn't seem like it, but yes, we've gone through 7 parts of this teaching, and my hope and my prayer is that this teaching has opened your eyes to the reality of our responsibility towards God and the necessity to make certain that we have done all we can to stand in the face of darkness and deception. I think it only fair that as we conclude this teaching, that we also talk about the setbacks and the defeats that the warrior suffers from time to time, because they are undeniable and they are an undeniable reality in our lives. Yes, sometimes things don't turn out the way we would have wanted them. They don't turn out the way we would have expected. And in those moments, how we react will determine how quickly we recover and how soon we're back on solid ground. So why do we suffer defeat at the hand of the enemy? No, we are not vanquished. We do not lose the war, but sometimes we do lose a skirmish here or there. Now, if you haven't experienced this, then you're a better man or woman than I. But yes, there are moments in my walk when I grow discouraged and disheartened, and I view that as a defeat. Even the prophets of old battled these feelings. Even they had to be reminded of the authority in which they walked. But, back to the central question. Why is it that believers suffer defeat? We suffer defeat at the hands of the enemy because we've talked ourselves into believing that we can be defeated. Rather than stand, we justify cowardice by telling ourselves there's nothing sinful in going along to get along, and rather than fight, we do our utmost to be inoffensive to the enemy, being silent when we ought to speak, and being static when we ought to act. Another reason many believers suffer defeat at the hands of the enemy is their ignorance of the weapons they have at their disposal. You can have the most up-to-date gear, the most technologically advanced armaments, but if you don't know how to use them, or what button to push, or which way to point it, chances are all the gear will only slow you down when you're trying to run away from the enemy. Most individuals have a vague understanding of the weapons believers have access to. But as far as a deeper understanding of how they're used or when they ought to be used, that's something beyond their grasp. As previously mentioned, there are weapons of defense, there are weapons of attack, and there are weapons that can be used to both defend oneself and attack the enemy if the need arises. Romans 13:12 says it this way: "The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light." Now, this armor of light that Paul speaks of in Romans is also referred to as the armor of righteousness in Corinthians. It is something we ourselves must put on after we have cast off the works of darkness and broken ties with all that it entails. God will not dress us when we can dress ourselves. Just as any parent will not insist upon dressing their child once that child has learned to dress themselves. Our slothfulness and distraction-prone mindset oftentimes steers us towards the conclusion that if the armor of light is not fastened upon us, it must be, God's fault somehow and not our own. The Word never insinuates we ought to let God dress us. It tells us to dress ourselves. Yes, I know that goes against the grain of what many mainstream churches are teaching nowadays, but it is not me you have to contend with. It is the Word of God. It says that we must put on the armor of light. It says that we must dress ourselves. Another aspect that we must take into account is that the works of darkness and the armor of light cannot overlap. We cannot continue to cling to the works of darkness while simultaneously putting on the armor of light, because they repel and they reject each other. Forever at odds, forever foes, forever mortal enemies. The gray area of the spiritual man only exists in the duplicitous man's imagination. God sees either darkness or light, good or evil, saved or lost. God does not work with shadows, with gray areas, nor does He approve of the barely getting there mindset so many accept. When we put on the armor of light, we are of the light. We serve the light, we defend the light, and we fight on behalf of the light. We cannot be divided in heart or mind and still claim to be of the light. It is because of this inescapable truth that I'm reticent in giving men and women who would twist the gospel and attempt to sidestep the word of God a pass or the benefit of the doubt. This is doubly true of those who have risen to prominence and see themselves as spiritual leaders or authorities. Each of us must measure every word. Each of us must weigh every thought. Each of us must compare every teaching to the Word and make sure that it is in harmony with it. And this need is amplified tenfold when men stand before other men and attempt to teach them the mysteries of God. When the Word of God speaks of armor, certain things are implied just by the word itself. First, one needs armor only if he is expecting battle. Second, one needs armor only if they have an enemy who's skilled enough or equipped enough to hurt them, wound them, or maim them in some way. Third, one needs armor only if confrontation and battle are imminent, a given, and no means of ceasefire or armistice exists. You don't see men walking around in armor during peacetime. Every soldier in the midst of battle, however, is fully equipped, having put on his armor with the expectation of what is to come. Because we have foresight and the Spirit of God has given us insight as to the reality of battle, we do not dawdle or delay, we do not put off or ignore, we put on the armor of light and prepare ourselves for battle as a good and faithful soldier ought. Although the following passage is often quoted, the frequency of it being quoted does nothing to take away from its profundity and impact. As such, I will leave you and also